The key didn't turn. It didn't even pretend to fit. I stood there for a second longer than I needed to, just to be sure, just to confirm that the house I paid $350,000 for no longer recognized me. The lock was new. The door was the same. The ocean behind it hadn't changed. I smiled, because that's what I do when something doesn't add up. I smile first. I calculate second. I knocked once. Not loud. Just enough to let whoever was inside know that someone who belonged here was standing outside. Footsteps followed. Slow. Confident. The door opened, and a man I had never seen before looked at me like I was interrupting his afternoon. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't need to. People like him don't ask questions when they think they already own the answers. I tilted my head slightly, still smiling. "I'm hoping this is just a very committed house-sitting situation," I said, light, polite, the kind of tone that makes people underestimate you on instinct. He didn't smile back. "Can I help you?" he asked. I let that sit for a second. Not the question. The phrasing. "Can I help you?" "In my house." "Interesting." "That depends," I said gently. "Are you paying the mortgage, or should I keep doing that?" He blinked. Just once. Behind him, I could see the living room. My living room. The same wide windows I had chosen so my dad could see the water without standing. The same low furniture so my mom wouldn't have to strain her knees. Except now there were different pillows. Different colors. Someone else's choices layered on top of mine like I had never existed. I heard my mother's voice before I saw her. Soft. Careful. Tige, she stepped into view behind him, and for a moment, she looked exactly the same. Same posture. Same way she held her hands together when she was nervous. My father followed, slower, avoiding my eyes like they were something fragile he might break if he looked too directly. I nodded, still calm. "Hi, Mom." Then I glanced at the man again. "I don't believe we've met." Which is surprising, considering I funded the introduction. Silence. Thick. Immediate. My father cleared his throat. "We were going to call you," he said. I gave a small laugh. Not sharp. Not cruel. Just enough to keep things pleasant. "You were going to call me," I repeated. "Before or after you changed the locks?" My mother stepped forward. "It's not what it looks like." I nodded again, slower this time. "That's usually true," I said. "Things are rarely exactly what they look like." I reached out and ran my fingers lightly over the new lock, the metal still clean, barely touched by weather. "This one's good," I added. "Solid choice." I would have picked the same brand. The man shifted uncomfortably. He was starting to realize something. Not everything. Just enough. I stepped back, giving them all space, still smiling, still composed, my voice warm in a way that made people lean in even when they shouldn't. "I just have one question," I said softly. "When you decided to rent out the house I built for you, did it ever occur to you to check whose name was still on it?" That was the moment everything changed. No yelling. No scene. Just silence. The kind that doesn't ask for attention. The kind that takes it. No one spoke. Not immediately. Silence has a way of stretching when people realize they are no longer in control of the story. I kept my expression easy, almost pleasant, like we were discussing something small, something fixable. My father finally looked at me, not fully, just enough to acknowledge that I was still standing there. "Tige, it was not supposed to happen like this," he said. His voice carried that familiar tone, the one that always tried to smooth things over without actually addressing them. I nodded once, thoughtful. "Most things are not," I replied. "That is why contracts exist." The man by the door shifted again, his confidence thinning at the edges. I signed a lease, he said carefully, like he was stepping into a conversation he did not understand. I turned to him, my smile still intact, softer now, almost reassuring. I am sure you did, I said. And I am sure it looked very official. I paused just long enough for the weight of that sentence to settle. The question is who had the authority to offer it. My mother stepped closer, her hands tightening together. We were just trying to make use of the space, she said. You were not here. The house was empty most of the time. I let out a quiet breath, not frustrated, just precise. Empty, I repeated gently. That is an interesting word for a place I built specifically so it would never feel that way for you again. She looked down. That was new. My father stepped in, trying to regain footing. It is temporary, he said. We needed the income. I tilted my head slightly. Needed, I said. That implies urgency. Something changed. He did not answer. He did not have to. I already knew that pattern. There is always a reason. It is just rarely the one people say out loud first. I took a step past them, not into the house, just enough to stand at the threshold, my fingers brushing lightly against the doorframe. I remember measuring this doorway, I said, almost to myself. We widened it by 4 inches so you would not have to turn sideways with the walker. My father's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Recognition. Discomfort. Memory. I thought about everything, I continued, my voice still calm, still warm. The slope of the path to the water. The height of the counters. The way the light hits the living room at sunset. I glanced back at the man. You probably noticed that part. Around 6:30, the whole room turns gold. It is difficult to ignore. He nodded slowly, unsure if agreeing was safe. It is nice, he said. I smiled a little wider. It is, I agreed. That is why I built it. Another pause. Not empty. Intentional. Not to rent. Not to flip. Not to convert into a side arrangement that no one thought to mention. My mother exhaled, her voice softer now. We did not think you would mind. I met her eyes fully this time. Not sharp. Not angry. Just clear. That is the part one find most interesting, I said. Not the lease. Not the lock. The assumption. I let that settle before continuing. You assumed I would not mind because I have not minded before. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. There it was. The pattern. Consistent. Reliable. Predictable. I stepped back from the door, giving them space again, my posture relaxed, my tone almost conversational. Let me ask you something, I said. When you gave him the keys, did you also give him the part where this house was never legally yours to offer? The man's expression changed immediately. Not panic. Not yet. But awareness. The kind that comes right before questions start forming. My father looked at him, then back at me. We are family, he said, like that explained everything. I smiled again, softer this time, almost kind. We are, I said. Which is exactly why I expected better paperwork. I watched the realization move across his face in slow motion, the way it does when numbers stop working the way people expect them to. The man looked from me to my parents and back again, recalculating his position in a situation he had not signed up to fully understand. Wait, he said, more to them than to me. You told me this was your property. My mother opened her mouth, then hesitated, her eyes flickering toward my father like she was waiting for the version of the truth they had agreed on earlier. My father straightened slightly, the way he always did when he thought confidence could replace clarity. It is our home, he said carefully. I nodded, almost approving. Emotionally, I added gently. Yes. Legally is where things get more specific. I reached into my bag, not in a dramatic way, just routine, like pulling out a receipt after dinner. Paper has a way of changing conversations without raising voices. I do not think anyone here is trying to create a problem, I said, my tone still warm, still controlled. But problems tend to appear when details are skipped. I unfolded a single document, not the whole file, just enough. Enough to make the point without overwhelming the moment. The man leaned slightly, not stepping forward, just curious enough to see what he might have missed. This is the deed, I said simply. Current. Updated. Filed. I let the silence do the rest. My name sat there quietly, exactly where it had always been. My father exhaled slowly. We were going to talk to you about transferring it, he said. I looked at him, really looked this time, not unkind, just direct. Were you, I asked softly, or did you assume time would handle that for you? He did not answer. He did not need to. Assumptions have a way of revealing themselves without explanation. The man shifted again, this time stepping back half an inch, like distance might help him avoid whatever was forming in front of him. I paid 6 months up front, he said, his voice tighter now. I turned to him immediately, my expression easing even more, almost apologetic. And that is exactly why I'm glad I came today, I said. Because you deserve clarity. I paused, choosing my words the way I always do, not to win, but to make sure no one could misunderstand. You entered into an agreement, I continued, with people who do live here, but do not own the authority to lease it. I let that sit, then added gently, that does not make you wrong. It just means you were not given the full picture. My mother stepped forward quickly. We can fix this, she said, her voice almost pleading now. I nodded immediately. Of course we can, I said. That is the part one am not worried about. I folded the paper neatly and placed it back into my bag, not as a threat, not as leverage, just as fact. What I am interested in, I continued, my voice softening even further, is understanding how we got here. I glanced around the room again, taking in the small changes, the unfamiliar details layered over something I had built with intention. Because this was never just a house, I said quietly. It was a solution. It was supposed to remove pressure, not create new variables. My father rubbed his hands together, a habit he had when things slipped outside his control. There were expenses, he said finally. Medical bills. Repairs. Things added up. I listened without interrupting. I always do. And instead of calling me, I said after a moment, you decided to create income from the one thing I gave you so you would not have to worry about money in the first place. He did not deny it. My mother looked at me, her voice smaller now. We did not want to burden you. I smiled again, softer than before, but this time there was something underneath it, something they could finally see. You did not burden me, I said. You just removed my ability to choose. The room went quiet again. Not tense. Not loud. Just clear. The kind of quiet that comes when everyone finally understands what the real issue is. I adjusted my sleeve slightly, a small, habitual motion, then looked at all of them, calm, composed, completely steady. So here is what we are going to do, I said, not as an order, not as a demand, but as someone who had already solved the equation. No one moved. Not right away. That is the thing about clarity. When it arrives, people need a moment to adjust to it. I kept my tone even, almost conversational, like we were solving a scheduling issue instead of untangling something much larger. First, I said gently, we make sure he is not caught in the middle of something he did not create. I nodded toward the man, offering him a small, reassuring smile. You have a valid expectation of stability. That matters. He looked at me differently now, less guarded, more attentive. People tend to relax when they realize you are not there to take something from them. My father shifted, uncertain. So what are you saying? He asked. He stays. I tilted my head slightly, considering. I am saying we honor what has already been set in motion, I replied. But we correct the structure behind it. I reached into my bag again, this time pulling out a small notebook, not formal, not intimidating, just something I always carry. 6 months up front, I repeated, glancing at the man. We convert that into a proper lease. Transparent terms. Signed by the actual owner. I let that word sit for a second, not sharp, just accurate. My mother looked at me carefully. And after that? She asked. I met her gaze, calm, steady. After that, we decide together what this house is supposed to be, I said. Because right now, it is trying to be 3 things at once. A home. An investment. And a secret. The last word landed quietly, but it stayed. My father exhaled, slower this time. We did not mean for it to feel like that, he said. I nodded once. I know, I replied. Intent and outcome rarely match on the first try. I walked a few steps along the porch, my fingers brushing the railing I had chosen myself, the wood still smooth under my hand. Do you remember, I said, not looking at them at first, the day we stood here before construction started? My mother's expression softened slightly. You brought those sketches, she said. I smiled faintly. 3 versions, I added. You picked the one with the wider windows. My father gave a small nod, almost reluctant. You said the light would help in the mornings, he said. I turned back to them, my expression warmer now, but no less precise. It was never about the windows, I said gently. It was about giving you something that worked with your life, not against it. I paused, letting the memory settle into the present. That is still the goal. The man shifted again, this time less tense. I do not want to cause problems, he said. I looked at him directly. You are not, I replied. You are simply part of the equation now. I closed the notebook with a soft tap. So here is the structure, I continued. We formalize your lease. You stay for the duration you paid for. No surprises. No sudden changes. I turned slightly toward my parents. During that time, we sit down. We go through expenses. Real numbers. Not estimates. Not guesses. My father nodded slowly, like he was beginning to understand the path forward. My mother watched me closely, something new in her expression. Not just concern. Respect, maybe. And then, she asked quietly. I smiled again, that same easy smile, but now it carried something steadier underneath. And then we rebuild the intention, I said. Because this house was never meant to solve money problems. It was meant to remove them. I glanced back at the door, at the new lock, at the subtle line where something had been changed without me. We just need to make sure it goes back to doing that. I stepped away from the entrance, giving them all space again, my posture relaxed, my voice light but clear. And next time, I added softly, we skip the part where I find out by meeting a stranger at my own front door. No one argued. No one needed to. The structure was already in place. They just had to follow it. The structure settled faster than I expected. That is the thing about clear decisions. Once they are spoken out loud, everything else starts aligning around them. The man nodded slowly, like someone who had just realized he had stepped into a situation with more layers than he originally saw. I would appreciate that, he said carefully. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. Clarity tends to be underrated, I replied. Until it becomes necessary. My father leaned against the railing, his posture softer now, less defensive. We should have called you, he said. Not as an excuse this time. More like a conclusion. I nodded once. Yes, I said simply. You should have. I let that sit without adding anything else. No lecture. No repetition. Just acknowledgement. My mother looked between us, her voice quieter than before. We did not want to make you feel like everything always comes back to you, she said. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. It does not, I replied gently. But responsibility has a way of finding the person who is already holding most of it. She did not argue. She understood. I stepped toward the edge of the porch, looking out at the water. The ocean was steady, unchanged, moving the same way it had the day I first stood here with a notebook and a plan. Do you know why I chose this location? I asked without turning back. My father hesitated. Because it was quiet, he guessed. I smiled faintly. Partly, I said. But mostly because it was predictable. I turned slightly, just enough for them to hear the shift in my voice. The tide comes in. The tide goes out. No surprises. No sudden changes. I let that contrast sit in the air. Behind me, I heard my mother exhale softly. We made it complicated, she said. I nodded. You made it uncertain, I corrected gently. Complicated can be solved. Uncertainty lingers. The man cleared his throat. So what happens next, exactly, he asked. I turned back fully, my expression calm, composed, already a few steps ahead. Next, I said, we sit down inside. All of us. We go through what has been agreed to so far. Then we rewrite it properly. I glanced at the door again, then back at him. You will have something you can rely on. Not just something you were told. He nodded, more confident now, like the ground under him had finally stopped shifting. My father straightened slightly. And the income? He asked, careful again. I met his eyes directly. We account for it, I said. Every dollar. Where it came from. Where it went. No gaps. I paused, then added with a small, almost playful smile, you raised me to pay attention to details. It would be a shame to ignore that now. That earned the smallest reaction from him. Not quite a smile. But close. My mother stepped closer to me, her voice softer, almost hesitant. Are you upset? She asked. I looked at her for a moment, really looked, then let out a quiet breath. I was, I said honestly. For about 30 seconds. I let that land before continuing. Then I realized this is not a problem. It is a pattern. She frowned slightly. A pattern? I nodded. Yes, I said. A series of small decisions that assume I will adapt after the fact instead of being included before it. Silence again. But different this time. Not defensive. Reflective. I adjusted my sleeve slightly, then stepped toward the door, stopping just short of crossing the threshold. The good news, I said lightly, is that patterns can be rewritten. I glanced at the lock one more time, then back at them. But only if everyone agrees to stop pretending they do not exist. No one disagreed. No one looked away. That was enough for me. I reached into my bag again, pulling out my phone this time, already opening a document, already outlining what needed to be done. Let us fix this properly, I said, my tone steady, almost effortless. This time, with everyone in the room. We moved inside together. Not rushed. Not awkward. Just, deliberate. The kind of movement that happens when everyone understands that something needs to be handled properly this time. The air felt different once I stepped in. Familiar, but slightly off, like a room that had been rearranged without asking the person who designed it. I took a slow look around, not judging, just observing. You kept the layout, I said lightly, glancing at the man. That was a good decision. The space works better when it is not forced. He nodded, a little more at ease now. It felt right, he said. I smiled faintly. It usually does when something was built with intention. I set my bag down on the table, the same table I had chosen for its height, its stability, the way it did not wobble even when weight shifted unevenly. Small things matter. They always do. I opened my phone, pulling up a blank document, my fingers moving with quiet efficiency. Let us start simple, I said. Names. Dates. Terms. My father sat down slowly, like he was adjusting to a version of me he had not fully seen before. My mother remained standing for a moment, then took the seat across from me, her posture more attentive than I had ever noticed. The man hesitated, then joined us, careful, respectful. Full name, I said, looking at him. He gave it. Clear. Measured. I typed it in. Move-in date, I continued. He answered. I entered it. Amount paid, I asked. 6 months, he said. I nodded. We will convert that into a fixed-term lease. No ambiguity. No assumptions. I glanced at my parents briefly. Everything written. Everything signed. My father shifted again. Do we need to involve anyone else? He asked. I tilted my head slightly. Only if we prefer confusion, I replied, my tone light, almost playful. Otherwise, we can handle this ourselves. That earned a small breath of something from my mother. Not quite relief. But close. I continued typing, each word precise, each line intentional. Utilities, I said. Who has been covering them? My mother answered quietly. I nodded. That continues for now. We do not disrupt what is already functioning. I paused, then added, we just make sure it is documented. The man leaned forward slightly. And after the 6 months, he asked. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes fully. After that, we revisit, I said. With everyone present. No decisions made in absent conversations. He nodded slowly, understanding more with each sentence. My father watched me carefully. You have already thought this through, he said. I gave a small smile. I usually do, I replied. It saves time later. There was a quiet moment after that. Not heavy. Not tense. Just, different. My mother spoke first. We should have trusted you with this, she said softly. I did not respond immediately. I finished typing the line I was on, then set the phone down for a second, looking at her with a calm, steady expression. You should have included me, I said gently. Trust is not the absence of involvement. It is the presence of it. She nodded slowly, taking that in. I picked up the phone again, completing the final section, then turned the screen toward the table so everyone could see. This is the structure, I said. Clear. Fair. Sustainable. The man read through it carefully. My father leaned in. My mother followed. No one rushed. No one questioned the direction. That was new. I let them sit with it, then added softly, we can print and sign later. For now, we agree. My father looked at me, something steadier in his expression now. We agree, he said. My mother echoed it. The man nodded. I closed the document with a light tap, then leaned back slightly in my chair, my posture relaxed, my tone easy again. See, I said with a faint smile, much better than changing locks and hoping for the best. A small pause. Then, unexpectedly, my father let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Not loud. Not forced. Just, acknowledgement. And for the first time since I arrived, the room did not feel uncertain anymore. It felt aligned. The agreement settled into the room quietly, like something that had always belonged there but had been waiting for the right moment to surface. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to fill the silence. That alone told me more than anything they could have said out loud. I leaned back slightly, letting my shoulders relax, my tone softening just enough to shift the energy again. "All right," I said lightly, "now that we have handled the structure, we can talk about the part that actually matters." My father looked at me, curious now instead of defensive. "What part is that?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Why none of you thought to call me," I replied, not sharp, not accusing, just clear. My mother lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked back up. "We thought you were busy," she said. I nodded slowly. "I am," I said. "But I am not unreachable." I let that sit for a second before adding, "There is a difference." My father exhaled. Quietly, his hands resting flat on the table now, no longer shifting, no longer searching for something to hold on to. "We did not want to rely on you again," he said. I tilted my head slightly, considering that. "You were not relying on me," I said gently. "You were including me." I paused, then added with a small, almost amused smile, "Those two things only look the same from a distance." The man glanced between us, then leaned back a little, giving the moment space. He understood now that this part was not about him. This was something older. Something patterned. My mother spoke again, her voice softer than before. "It has always been easier to let you handle things," she said. I met her gaze steadily. "Easier for who?" I asked. She did not answer immediately. She did not need to. The answer was already in the room. I nodded once, then leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm, still even. "I do not mind handling things," I said. "I mind being brought in after the decisions have already been made." My father nodded slowly, like he was finally aligning the pieces in his head. "We thought we were protecting you from more responsibility," he said. I gave a quiet breath of a laugh, not mocking, just honest. "That is like removing the steering wheel and saying you are helping the driver relax," I replied. That landed. Not harsh. But clear. My mother's expression shifted, something softer, something more aware. "We did not see it that way," she said. I smiled gently. "I know," I said. "That is why I am explaining it now." There was another pause. Not uncomfortable. Just real. The kind that happens when something actually changes. I glanced at the window, at the way the light was starting to shift just slightly, the edge of gold beginning to form along the water. "Do you remember what you told me when I was younger?" I asked, looking back at my father. He frowned slightly, thinking. "About what?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "About responsibility," I said. "You said if you take something on, you stay with it. You do not step in and out depending on what is convenient." He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his expression. Just recognition. "I remember," he said quietly. I nodded. "I listened," I replied. That was it. No lecture. No extension. Just the truth placed exactly where it belonged. My mother reached across the table slightly, her voice almost a whisper now. "We should have trusted you enough to bring you in from the start," she said. I looked at her hand, then back at her, my expression steady, my tone warm. "You still can," I said. "That part has not gone anywhere." The man shifted slightly in his seat, then gave a small nod, almost to himself. "I have never seen a situation handled like this," he said. I glanced at him with a light smile. "That is because most people wait until things break before they fix them," I replied. I prefer to adjust while everything is still standing. My father let out a slow breath, then gave a small, genuine nod. Not agreement. Not compliance. Something closer to respect. And that was the moment I knew this was no longer just about a house. It was about something finally being understood the way it should have been all along. The room felt lighter after that. Not because the situation had been simple, but because it had finally been made clear. Clarity has a way of changing the weight of things. I stood up slowly, not in a rush, just shifting the energy again. "Come here," I said lightly, gesturing toward the window. My mother followed first, then my father, and after a brief hesitation, the man joined us too, keeping a respectful distance. The light had settled exactly where I knew it would, stretching across the water, reflecting back into the room in soft gold. 6:30, I said quietly. Right on time. My father looked out at the horizon, then at me. "You planned this too," he said. I smiled faintly. "Not the time," I replied. "Just the conditions that allow it to happen." I let that line sit for a moment before continuing. That is the difference between control and intention. My mother watched the light move across the floor, her voice softer now. "We forgot what this place was meant to feel like," she admitted. I nodded once. "It happens," I said. "When something valuable becomes familiar, people start treating it like it will always be there no matter what they do." I turned slightly, leaning back against the wall, my posture relaxed, my tone still warm. "But structures matter," I added. "Whether it is a house or a relationship." The man looked at me, thoughtful now instead of uncertain. "You talk about it like it is all the same system," he said. I gave a small, easy smile. "It is," I replied. "Everything is built on agreements. Some written. Some assumed. The problem usually starts when people confuse the two." My father let out a quiet breath, nodding slowly. "We assumed too much," he said. I met his eyes, steady, not unkind. "You skipped the part where I get a say," I replied gently. "That is not an assumption. That is a decision." He did not argue. He did not look away either. That was new. My mother turned to me, her voice carrying something softer than before. "And you are not angry?" she asked again, like she was still trying to understand where I stood. I considered that for a second, then smiled lightly. "I am precise," I said. "Anger is usually just imprecision with volume." That made the man let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. My father glanced at him, then back at me, and for the first time, there was something close to appreciation in his expression. "You always do that," he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Do what?" I asked. "Turn something complicated into something clear," he replied. I shrugged lightly. "It is just pattern recognition," I said. "Once you see it, you cannot unsee it." I pushed myself off the wall and walked slowly toward the kitchen, running my fingers lightly along the counter edge, checking the height without thinking. Still correct. Still exactly where it should be. "We are going to adjust a few more things," I said casually. "Nothing major. Just enough to bring everything back into alignment." My mother followed me, watching closely. "Like what?" she asked. I opened a drawer, then closed it again, noting the contents without comment. "Communication," I said simply. "No more decisions that involve shared assets without shared conversations." I turned back to them, my expression calm, my tone steady. "If something changes, I hear about it before it becomes a situation." My father nodded immediately this time. No hesitation. "That is fair," he said. I gave a small smile. "It is not just fair," I replied. "It is efficient." The man stepped slightly closer, his posture more relaxed now. I think I understand why this works, he said. I glanced at him. Why, what works? I asked. You, he said. I smiled, just a little. I am just consistent, I replied. People usually mistake that for something more complicated. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the space, the light, the people standing in it. Everything was still here. Just slightly misaligned. And now, slowly, it was coming back into place. We are almost done, I said quietly. Just one more adjustment. The last adjustment was the simplest one. It always is. Not a contract. Not a number. Not even a decision. Just a sentence, said at the right time, in the right tone, with no room left for interpretation. I turned back to them, letting the quiet settle fully before I spoke. From now on, I said gently, we do not make each other guess. No one interrupted. No one tried to soften it. That was the difference this time. My father nodded first, slower than before, but steady. No more guessing, he repeated. My mother followed, her voice quieter but certain. We tell each other before things change. I smiled, small and genuine. That is all I was asking for, I said. I let my gaze move across the room one more time, not checking for flaws, just confirming alignment. The space felt different now. Not because the furniture had changed, or the lease, or even the ownership. It felt different because everyone inside it understood the structure holding it together. The man cleared his throat softly. I will sign whatever you need, he said. I shook my head slightly, still smiling. You will sign what is fair, I corrected. Nothing more. Nothing less. He nodded, more confident now, like he had found solid ground again. I walked toward the door, pausing just long enough to look at the lock one last time. New. Clean. Functional. Not wrong. Just, incomplete without context. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small key. Holding it between my fingers for a second before turning back to them. This still works, I said lightly. Just not with that lock. My father let out a quiet breath, something between a sigh and a release. We can change it back, he said. I tilted my head slightly, considering, then smiled. We can, I replied. But we do not need to rush. I stepped closer, placing the key gently on the table instead of handing it to anyone directly. What matters is not which key opens the door, I continued, my voice soft but clear. It is who gets to decide when it is used. My mother looked at the key, then at me, her expression steady now, no hesitation left. You do, she said. I shook my head slightly, still calm. We do, I corrected. Together. That is the adjustment. That landed differently. Not as control. Not as authority. As structure. As balance. My father nodded again, this time without pause. Together, he repeated. I gave a small, satisfied nod, then stepped back, my posture relaxed, my tone light once more. Good, I said. That makes everything else easier. I picked up my bag, not in a hurry, just ready to move forward. The man stood as well, offering a small, respectful nod. Thank you, he said. I smiled at him, easy, effortless. For what? I asked. For not turning this into something worse, he replied. I let out a quiet breath of a laugh. It was never going to be worse, I said. It just needed to be clear. I moved toward the door, pausing one last time as the light shifted again, the gold deepening across the water, reflecting back into the room exactly the way I had planned from the beginning. I glanced over my shoulder, meeting my parents' eyes, not as someone fixing a mistake, but as someone who had simply restored alignment. Family helps family, I said softly, a faint smile returning, but clarity helps it last. No one argued. No one needed to. And this time, when I stepped out, the door behind me did not feel like something I had been locked out of. It felt like something I had finally set right.